Purdue is interesting because, and the reason that I'm known is that at Purdue, we have so many Chinese students. So we have a huge Chinese population. And as we'll see, not a lot of foreigners that speak Chinese. So that's sort of where, if you just say, 哪有那个会说中文的老外? Like, they know they know who you're talking about. It's kind of sad, actually, how few of us there are. The goals here were understanding the challenges that await the students. High school is really relevant for this. So I'm going to be talking to you most since you're the teacher. But high school, this will affect them the most. So you need to know what the challenges are and what the fate is awaiting your students after they graduate. So you know what's going on with them in the classroom, in the high school setting, but what's going to happen to them afterwards. I was a little different case. I didn't start until college. I didn't start Chinese until I was about 19. So I got a bit of a late start, but you have a really good opportunity to change some students in your classroom. The strategies to help them achieve those goals. You can actually make some changes or modifications or emphasize certain things to help them get the goal. Stop me if anyone doesn't understand anything. Ask it in Chinese, ask it in English. We don't care, right? The problem with language is that it's very specific to what career or what usage topic you need. Someone who's a medical doctor and fluent in a second language might not be able to talk to you about basketball because it's just a very different topic. Language fluency is so subject specific. This also includes working as a translator, and kind of what I was talking to Dean about earlier, and a lot of the different things that I'm called upon to do in our company. You almost feel like a reporter where you have to write a story about a subject and look like you know what you're talking about, but there's so many different topics and different subjects you have to cram for them at the end. And a lot of times on my way to an event, I'm trying to learn the vocab for this specific engineering company or this trade delegation, or someone's in the hospital and they need something translated. You have so many different sets of jargon and professional usage language that it's hard to know everything. And so as a translator, if you just say, I'm a translator of Chinese, well, that's nice, but what do you translate within that? So proficiency level needed to actually get to the level where you can say, I'm working in that language, is far higher than the average person who just says I'm fluent. So you can create students that are fairly well spoken, they're on their way to fluency, but if they're the level that you need to actually day to day with coworkers be working in that language is pretty high compared to what we're getting fresh out of the classroom. So the main problem with this setup here, which is that you need to have a specific knowledge set and you need a high level of fluency, is that which one do you pick when you're learning? Do you focus only on becoming fluent? Because that's a full-time job in itself, right? Or do you focus on your career and then the fluency kind of goes by the wayside? How do you get both of those together? My way was going to culinary school because I was learning cooking, but I was doing it in Chinese. So I had to learn a different skill, but I was learning it in the target language. And these are some things that maybe we can agree on or disagree on, and just shout it out if you have a strong feeling. But I don't think that fluent is an exact unit of measurement. I would say it's not a measurement that we can scientifically measure that this person's fluent. And you can tell that by looking up statistics of trying to see, Google, how many people are fluent in Spanish, in Chinese, that are not native speakers. It's really difficult because there's so much variation of levels of fluency. It's often it's a personal opinion or a judgment. A lot of times people say, oh, you're really fluent. Or rarely, I guess, would you say, I do worry about people that say I'm extremely fluent in Chinese. The only time that I will say that I'm fluent in Chinese is if I know I'm talking to someone who is not a linguist, isn't bilingual, doesn't understand the processes behind language learning, and I know that saying the word fluent is something that they can hold on to and they can understand and identify really quick. And so that's the only time that I'll say it. If I'm talking to a room such as we have here, I'm not going to say I'm fluent, but I'll say I work in Chinese language on these different areas, these different professions, because it's too much to, a lot of times what we get, which is really interesting when you have new clients, is you get the language test. They want to see if you speak it. So they'll pull out like Shijing or some ancient Chinese poem and say, what does this say? And I say, well, we're still working on the translation for that as a society, but sure, let's take a look at it, right? We're not flashcard, we're not performers when we speak a language if we're bilingual. It's just not how it works. And sometimes it's hard to educate people that don't have a second language under their belt to understand that. So that's why we say it's a personal judgment, and that's how you get the term fluent. It's heavily subject matter specific. We've been talking about that, but it's not a level of certification. So there's really no fluent certification that I know of anyway. And if you know of one, tell me so that I can add that to my resume. But I think it is an attainable goal. Fluency is, like you're saying, with the majors that spent their time on it, really worked hard. It is attainable. You can do that. And I love the quote. I think this was yours, right? Because I give you credit for it constantly, everywhere we go. The dumbest man in China speaks fluent Chinese, and you are smarter than the dumbest person in China. Right? Do you understand the logic behind that? That it's saying if 中国最笨的人会说中文，你比那个人还聪明. So, right? So I think that is the perfect quote to motivate people. School can be a great place to learn, but it really depends on the teacher. That's why we all have memories of that teacher, because that was the one that taught us how to learn. And there doesn't seem to be as much focus on how to learn as there is pounding the subject into your brain. So my argument is that students may not become fluent in the classroom, but that's where they're going to get these tools that they need to become fluent. They have to have that base. Everyone says, you got to start with 101, or you need to start with a CD, or you got to start somewhere. You can't just walk around and pick it up. You can, but it's going to take a lot longer, and you're going to miss out on a lot of fundamentals while you're doing so. So this presentation is really talking about the tools that you're going to give them. And what are those? I think the most important one, for me anyway, was a comfortable learning environment. They have to be comfortable with the classroom. We'll go through these in just a second. Extremely strong base in fundamentals. Mastery of fundamentals, the building blocks. You don't build houses unless you understand the theory of building houses. Right? Instruction of practical information. Current language skills. What they're going to see on Weixin when they're talking to each other. Current practical language usage. Specific motivation for each student. So it's very specific to each student. They have different ways that they need motivated. So going through these, of taking the job of teaching seriously, your job as teaching one to learn is a serious job, but yourself, and how do you create a comfortable language classroom? How are your students addressing you? Do they have to address you very formally? If it's in Chinese, then obviously you can use 老师, because that is how it's done in China, and that's giving them a bit of the culture. But if they are calling you by your English name, it doesn't necessarily need to be Mrs. Smith or Mr. Smith. Mr. isn't really it was a title you were given when the universe decided what gender you were going to be. You didn't have to really work for it so much. I think you became 18, you became a Mr. So it's not a title that's achieved. That's just putting distance between yourself and the student. So it's okay to start with that. Let them know that you're the teacher. Let them know that you're the professor. But if you're really trying to help them learn a language, you have to make yourself a friend in their learning rather than the teacher that looms over them. You don't want them to learn out of fear. You want them to learn out of relaxed environments. If you have an intimidating presence as a teacher, your students are just going to be uncomfortable that you're going to catch them not knowing something. And in language learning, we don't know most of the time, right? But we just get better at pretending that we do, and that's where the learning comes in. So, by its nature, foreign language classrooms are so different than regular classrooms. I think, and I would say that in one class period of a foreign language, there's more opportunities, especially in high school, where you have to be cool if you're a high school student. There's a lot of energy put into being cool. I'm still working on that, but some of the students, that is where they spend their time, is on how to be cool. And there's more opportunities for embarrassment in a 1-hour language class, I think, than all the other periods combined. Because you got to put yourself out there and embarrass yourself, except for maybe gym class. You can embarrass yourself a lot in gym class. And so what do we say? Those who can't teach gym. Right? So, language fundamentals. Tones, for the love of God, please teach tones. Tones. So the tones are sometimes covered in the first half an hour of the first or second class. And that's it. Now you do tell them as they go along, no, it's the second tone, right? And then you become the conductors. It's the third tone, and then it's the fourth tone, and the second. But so you do, and actually a lot of times you'll see students that are Chinese learners that they conduct to themselves. When they're talking to you, they're doing the tones. It's just because of they've learned that way. You eventually have to learn to put the hand down. But if you really work on the tones and not just using ma as an example, the ma, right? Like instead of using that, just work on the tones. Do a lot of different words. It doesn't have to be just ma. Everybody uses that as the example, but work on different words so they really just master how to make the sound of the tone. And really drive home the point that makes it a completely different word. So it's not just like if you use the wrong tone, it's a little harder to understand. No, it's actually a different word. And I think American students have trouble really understanding that or internalizing that. So focus, please, on the tones. Otherwise, all of your students, when they go to China, are going to sound like people from Xinjiang, right? Uge, yang, ro, chuar, all first tone. So that's sort of the joke, but they don't get tones. Sentence order, right? Like up here, 明天我要去看电影. 我要去看电影明天. That's the second way is how Americans would say it, and it's really hard to flip that grammar. I always tell people when in doubt, speak like Yoda. It usually works for you. Same thing with the sentence structures. Just like those words are important, I think sentence structures are almost more important. What are the most common sentence structures? Pound that into their head, because now they can replace the words, the individual words, but they don't have to translate the whole sentence and words. They already have the sentence. They just need to replace a word in it. It makes your translation in your brain go much faster until the point where they don't need to translate. Okay, so going back to this again, then, or adding more onto this. One thing that I always think is a really good motivator, what are the words that your students on their own will look up first? Bad words. Why? Because it's fun. It's the most fun thing ever. And there's nothing more awkward or interesting to watch than someone speaking a foreign language and they just know some really bad words, right? And they're just happily saying them. So, yeah, so it's really bad, right? Like, I have trouble saying it out loud now. But your students will, be little bouncing bunnies running around cussing everyone out. It's describing things to do to your mother. So, that was the phrase. But they want to know, and so I think as a teacher, that encourages fun in the classroom. Obviously, you don't want your students just saying this, when your boss shows up and that's what they've learned. But if there's something they want to know, tell them, because that enforces the idea that they can learn on their own, that they can have a curiosity of a word or a phrase or something to translate. You teach it to them, and that's sort of them taking the initiative to learn. Not just, no, we don't have time for that, back to the textbook. That really breaks that enthusiasm. So, motivation. It's a lot easier to find a personal motivation to learn when you know that it's a life skill that you're learning. Language, I think, is seen differently. It is seen as a life skill more so than just math. Yes, we're going to use math, but I can go to another country and I can talk to people. I can help my friends talk to them, or I can talk to my grandparents now. That is a life skill. Suggest to them how it's going to add value to their life, right? How is it going to help them achieve those personal goals we talked about? What jobs might interest them that they don't know about. So get online yourself, look up some of those jobs. Explain how that's going to help their resume in a field that they already know. Ask them what they're interested in. Tell them, engineering, really? Do you know they do joint ventures back and forth with China? Whether you think you are or not, you are a career advisor if you want to produce a fluent student. What service did I leave out? Translation. I don't say that I'm a translator or an interpreter. Why? I don't like it. I hate being the interpreter or the translator. I really don't like it at all. I'll do it, begrudgingly, because I can, but that's not what I bill myself as. And the reason why is because I don't think that translation is a productive way to have a business meeting, that you and this gentleman are sitting across from each other, and everything you say, then I have to translate, and everything he says goes back and forth. I think it's much more valuable to have someone who's bilingual, understands the goals, understands your industry, your company, and is able to be your intermediary going back and forth between you and really getting those goals done. That way you have time, I can discuss it with you, then I can discuss it with him, and I don't have to depend on perfectly accurate translation going back and forth. Because some things, as we know, don't translate. And we also know, if we've ever translated for anyone, some people aren't used to working with a translator, and they will provide a monologue and then say, okay, go ahead and translate. Well, I can't remember what you even said. Right? So it's very difficult. You'll also have people, especially in Indiana where I'm from, that'll give you phrases like, God willing and the creek don't rise, we're going to get those parts in tomorrow. How does one translate that into Chinese? Because they'll say, what does the water table have to do with the shipment? Are they coming in by boat? Or are they like, no, this guy is just, it's the local vernacular, right? That's just how he talks. So translation to me doesn't seem like the most effective way to do business. The other thing you'll run into is Google Translate. Well, we don't need a translator. We have Google Translate because that's accurate, right? And anyone who does know that Google Translate and some of these other online translators aren't accurate is probably going to understand that you have other services to offer them. So your students, if they don't bill themselves as a translator, I think that they just say, I am a person who's fluent in this topic, in this industry. I can help you out with your international venture goals. That's going to be a much more marketable person for your students. So that's sort of the way we do it. All of these already require me to have the ability to translate. So all those services, they need it by default. So that's why I don't say I'm a translator, because I've already got it. And I think that's going to help your students tremendously. But I think that the stereotypical job we get if we're fluent is we're going to be a translator. Just, it's not the best way to make the most money and give a commission back to your teacher. Make sure you tell them after you graduate you're required to give me, like tithing the church, you're required to give me 10%. Right? You'll make a lot of money if you do that. So in closing, some of your students literally dread going to your class. They are in fear. I was in fear of going to Chinese class. Right? I failed most all of my exams. Some students find it amusing or interesting. It's just something neat, kind of something that they go to. Other students are going to have a need to learn Chinese. And they can all be in that category with your guidance. So if you show them that motivation, that specific to them motivation, they're going to get a need to learn. And that's what's going to create fluent people. So, sound good? Yeah. You can contact us anytime. We've got Wei Xin that's been on here the whole time. So, bit preaching to the choir. So, I didn't see many angry growls or gnashing of teeth. Yeah, Dean?
One question, especially for the high school teacher. You touched on culture, but can you teach the Chinese language and not cover the culture and somebody even have those basic building blocks?
I think technically on paper you could say I taught Chinese and not taught the culture on paper only. I think that's a horrible way to learn a language, because how do you learn a language without any culture? They go hand in hand. And the culture makes you want to learn the language. The language makes you understand the culture. I started culinary school because I wanted to know what to buy at the grocery store, because the grocery stores are completely different in China and the outdoor markets. But because I went to culinary school, now it makes perfect sense, right? So you have to understand the culture for something to click, and then the language comes much easier after that. So you can really make your classroom sort of a mini China. There's nothing that says you have to do anything American culture while you're in the class, especially if you have your scarf on and now you're all shirt, right? It was my personal plea from a student who failed all his exams in Chinese and was passed because the teachers either felt sorry for me or they just needed the demographic of non-native Chinese speakers to advance. Maybe it was closer to the second one. But just know that I had to learn a lot of fundamentals after class because it was skipped over so fast. Whatever time you think it's going to take about twice that. So just really work with them on that and kind of see what their needs are. And everything will be good. So yeah, we're done. We're on to the next session. So thank you. Thank you. All of the thousands, tens of thousands of people. Please keep these people back. Keep the crowd back.